Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this special New Year's Eve Ag Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, here we are looking at the last big snowstorm. This is one that went through between Christmas here and New Year's, and we dropped quite a bit of snow through a big section of the country here, in some locations well over a foot of snow. After the system went through, the winds were quite strong. We actually saw ground blizzards forming the next day. But as we were progressing into the early morning hours here on New Year's Eve, I was kind of taking a look at what was going on right here in this section of South Dakota. Now, the overall flow pattern is set up just like this, and we've got this trough that's going to be developing this low pressure system that's going to go racing up toward the East Coast, soaking the Eastern Corn Belt throughout the day on New Year's Eve and then into New Year's Day. But it's on the back side of that where we got a lot of cold air that we got this interesting setup happening. You see, coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, there's plenty of warm, moist air that's kind of advecting or moving from the south to the north. But there's bitterly cold air that's sneaking down south out of Canada behind this. You can see some of the snow showers there. But you see that pink? That pink shows us where we have some freezing rain. And I imagine that if you were driving anywhere in this section of South Dakota, so I'm thinking here really centered on Aberdeen, weather conditions were awful on Sunday night into early Monday morning. This is a static radar image, just kind of showing you that where the lighter precipitation was falling. But check this out. With our Doppler technology here, we can actually see what type of precipitation was falling. Where you see these reds, this is where we had a mix. So there was some freezing rain and sleet here, and then snow back here where it was blue. But it was this area right down here that I imagine was absolutely treacherous. You see, this is what the observed sounding looked like when they launched it from Aberdeen around 7 p.m. in the evening. Now look at this. The temperature profile, I'm going to outline it for you, featured this large inversion, which started here from the surface, warming with height, and then began to cool as it went up. Now, what's the significance of that? The significance is this layer right here. I tried to draw with an arrow. That's the melting layer, which means if you have snowflakes that are falling from above, when they get into this melting layer, they can completely melt into raindrops. But then when they get down near the ground, look at this. It might be hard to see, but the ground temperature was 29 degrees. What that means is that raindrop falls near the ground into that sub-freezing air, but instead of turning back into ice, it super cools. And that looks something like this. Check out this. This is one of my favorite videos I like to show my students. This is a bottle full of super cooled water. We're going to pour here into this cup, and all of a sudden a nucleation event takes place and we start to freeze that super cooled water. This is the freezing on contact process we're talking about when we make freezing rain. And I think for those folks in South Dakota, late in the night on Sunday into early in the morning on Monday, we're dealing with a lot of this. And it's an amazing video to watch here, but the atmosphere is capable of doing this all the time. Okay, with that, where are we going? Well, check out our all hazards weather map for early in the morning on Monday. We've got winter weather advisories into this area. We've got a winter storm warning. We've got wind chill warnings on either side of that. Also, we're watching for some snow coming to parts of Wisconsin, Northern Illinois, and Michigan. Dense fog advisories, more snow here in the Four Corner states. And I'll tell you something, if you live in here, it's going to get very, very wet. So let's take a look at what's going on here by starting off first with our high resolution NAM model. Beginning early in the morning on Monday, we see our low pressure system is kind of taking off here. And I'll tell you something, it's this area that I want to be on the lookout for some severe weather. And then we're talking snow on the back side of this. We'll have too much warm air out ahead of this, making most of this going to be rain. So let's take off the drawings here and you can kind of watch these major features evolve. So getting you through the day on Monday, you can see how this is kind of taking shape. Let's watch it again here. There it is. See the strong line of storms there by noon on Monday moving through the lower Mississippi River Valley. That is the area that I'm quite concerned about for some strong to severe storms. It looks as though we might get enough cold air on the back side of this one, though, that as it slides through parts of eastern Iowa, then into northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and into Michigan, we could get some snow. See that? So we're going to be watching that region right there for the transition, the changeover as we get into the afternoon and evening hours on Monday for some snow. It certainly then carries into Michigan there with the snowfall throughout the overnight hours on Monday. So first system then exits and goes on off to the northeast. Now behind this one, we bring in some bitterly cold air. So there is the potential in this area for some, widely scattered snow showers in the overnight hours on Monday into early Tuesday morning. Meanwhile, back here, still deep into the trough, we have around the Four Corner states more snow that's piling up in that area. And you can just see it kind of sitting there and spinning around that upper level trough. And it looks as though Also, things are kind of quiet here Tuesday into Wednesday, but that is just the beginning of our next system. You can now start to see it brewing there in Texas. Now, let's take a look at this by looking at, first of all, at temperatures. Where those wind chill warnings are in place, I will show you some bitterly cold air coming through, but look down here as well. It's kind of neat to watch the front progress, which will move through the southern Mississippi River Valley over toward the southeast, kicking off that severe weather threat in the day on Monday. So check this out. Here's what temperatures look like. Now, just so you can see, when we break into these colors, we're talking about below zero. So we have below zero temperatures here with strong winds, and it is going to be bitterly cold, at least in the near term in that area. Meanwhile, if I step this back, look at the sharp boundary here where that front's progressing right now through Mississippi, Tennessee, and Kentucky Monday afternoon, and it moves on off. And there comes the cold air to greet us with the new year. So this is now 12 p.m. on the 1st of January, and we've got some cold northerly flow moving across much of the middle part of this country. But the question I'm trying to answer here is, how long does this cold air hang on? Because we've been discussing now for several weeks what we thought the transition was going to look like into the new year. But we've got some new data, and I want to share it with you. First, what's the European model saying on all this? Well, this map starts you off at 6 a.m. on Monday morning. So this is New Year's Eve. You can see the widespread precipitation here. A lot of heavy rain in this area. Pay attention to the strong storms that kind of blow up down here where I drew this second circle here in the next few moments. And of course, you'll see the snow spreading on the back side of this. So there goes quick. Let's step it back. Take a look at this. So this is noon on Monday. This is now getting into Monday evening. And again, we see this region and through here potentially having to switch over to some snow. So we're going to have to watch that area very, very carefully throughout the afternoon and evening hours on Monday. Meanwhile, widespread kind of light snow on the backside of this, getting all the way back into parts of Colorado. And again, we're still sitting in this upper level trough. That's why we're getting the support for that snow in that area. As we progress forward, you can see that the rain spreads to the northeast, the lighter snow showers on the back side of this. And again, like I said, in the overnight hours on Monday into Tuesday morning, we could possibly see some lighter snow spreading in through this area as well. Now that's system number one. Now, because that trough is still in place, look at this. Here comes the next system. Now, just like we saw in South Dakota with the cold air that comes racing down from Canada, we may have enough cold air in place that we'll have to be on the lookout for the potential for another icing event there in parts of Texas and Oklahoma as we progress into the overnight hours on Wednesday. So let's see what this next system does. It too lifts toward the north and east. But because there's some colder air in place, and because of a little bit of a shift in the position of the jet stream, this one doesn't lift quite as far to the north and east. And the big question remains, will we be able to put some snow down in this area with that cold air that's on the back side? It's a tough forecast. Multiple model runs have suggested it would. But again, we're going to have to wait to see if we get that cold air in place. Another thunderstorm event down here to the south and east, racing on off to the kind of the Carolinas, soaking them yet again with another low pressure system. And just to show you how active the jet stream is, we got another one that's coming through. Look at this. I'm now up to January 7th coming through there. Now, don't look at this one and assume we got all the details right. I'm mainly showing you this forecast just to let you know that the system remains active. So this section of the country, it just stays wet. And I want to explain to you the big reasons why. Now, in the longer range forecast, I put up there at the top of this slide, competition. And here's been the issue. We've been discussing about the sudden stratospheric warming event that was going to be coming in toward the end of the year. It was going to weaken the polar vortex and kind of extend it off in this area. And normally, if that weakening of the polar vortex, which is in the stratosphere, is coupled with the troposphere, this sends the eastern half of the country into really cold conditions. In fact, we are seeing that by January 6th, the polar vortex actually splits into two pieces, one of which sits over the northeastern part of the United States. Really, it's more about right there. And if that happens, well, normally that would signal a really cold air outbreak for the eastern half of the United States. But this is some of the things we're competing with. The Mad-Julian oscillation has been in phase 5 for a while. And phase 5 is normally a warmer phase. And it's going to slowly progress into phase 6 as we get into the new year. And the European model has it kind of curling around at low amplitude here into phases 7 and 8. And that's way different from what we had seen earlier, which means which is when it was going to go into much higher amplitude. And if it curls back around, we're going to have to pay close attention to that. While it stays here in the null phase, that's going to leave other things to kind of dominate the flow. But phases 5 and 6 tend to be warmer phases. We had initially forecast this going much quicker through phases 5 and 6, getting over to those cooler phases like 7, 8, and 1. So that's a major change in the forecast as we progress into the new year. Here's the other thing. The jet stream, as we begin the new year, is going to be very zonal across the Pacific, and it looks as though it's going to favor this kind of split pattern, where we're going to have a branch of the subtropical jet stream, that's where I kind of put the 2 arrows, and the northern branch is going to kind of build kind of into this ridge at times over the west United States. And if that happens, and we just kind of keep reinforcing troughs here, that just isn't the right configuration to get bitterly cold air to stay in the eastern half of North America. So you see, right now, long-range forecasting is a mess, and the models are flip-flopping every single run because there are so many different things that are kind of trying to vie for control over the flow of the atmosphere. And this just happens sometimes, and predictability is quite low because of it. I'll say this, because of the dominance of the subtropical jet, I expect this part of the country to stay quite active in terms of its storm track over the coming days and weeks. So let me show what I mean. Here's the upper level flow pattern. As we kind of play this out, I got you here into Wednesday. There's that trough finally. Remember we talked about the kind of the 3-headed trough here that was kind of anchored in place? Okay, you can kind of see them still there as we progress into the end of this week. We'll finally dislodge that trough, there it goes, by Thursday, getting it to sweep there across the southeast. But at the same time that happens, look what the pattern's going to tend to do. We keep bringing in multiple troughs. There's one here, there's one there, and as they keep swinging here into the west coast of the United States, that tends to put a ridge in this part of the country. And that ridge just doesn't allow for the breakdown and major cold air intrusions that we had originally kind of seen for the start of the new year. And look, we keep developing that broader trough feature in the Gulf of Alaska hugging the west coast. And when that happens, the flow pattern's going to tend to do this. And the subtropical jet stream comes right in there to meet it. And so because of that setup, it's really hard to be bringing in quite a bit of cold air to the eastern half of the country and leave it there. Now, there will be some cold air intrusions. I mean, my goodness, look at the start of the new year. By the time we get here into the 1st, we've got temperatures here in the north central plains dipping all the way down into Texas that could be 15 to 20 degrees Celsius colder than average. Meanwhile, look what the ridge is doing over here in the southeast, keeping things quite warm. Watch as we progress forward here, though. Look at as the ridge builds out west, the warmth comes into central Canada. And what ends up happening is once we get into this first week of January, the model's kind of just picking up on maybe a slight warm bias, but overall near average temperatures. And so instead of us going into a really cold pattern to start the month, it looks as though it's going to be a bit more moderated. So that's an important adjustment, and we've been watching it carefully over the last several days evolve, but these longer range model projections have been quite tricky. All right, what about precipitation? Well, as I mentioned, because of the strength of that subtropical jet and the jet stream in the Pacific kind of favoring this is the area that we're going to continue to see being wetter than average as we progress throughout the middle part of this month. So remember, this is some of the same states that have already had their wettest year on record, and they'll be starting 2019 quite wet as well. Let's take a quick trip south of the equator and talk about South America. You're looking at a map over there on the left that shows you the last 30 days of precipitation in terms of percent of normal. I just want to show you this. In Mato Grosso, about mid-month, we made a transition here to being much drier than average. You can see it's still raining, but the rainfall amounts are far below average because the Brazilian monsoon, which flows in this direction, has been weakened. Okay, it's been weakened because the Madden-Julian oscillation has been out of phase with it. Look down here in southern Brazil. In southern Brazil, we're talking now into like Paraná, Mato Grosso do Sul. They have built up a substantial deficit in precipitation. Yes, it has been raining, but the problem is the deficit is already there. And we've been talking about this. let me show you this. Because the MJO is expected to stall out there for a little bit longer in phases 5 and 6 and 7, that does not bring in the upper level divergence we need in this area to bring in quite a bit more precipitation. So what do we see? We see wet north, we see wet south in Argentina. That means a lot of thunderstorms in Argentina and Uruguay and far southern Brazil, but we still see the longer range European model picking up on that drier pattern through the beginning of January. And they are starting to harvest those 90-day beans that they planted back in mid-September and late September in parts of Mato Grosso. So this is an important thing to be thinking about here. And to finish this up, I at least want to show you where I think the hottest place in the world will be for when we start the new year. This is a map showing you high temperatures on January 1st throughout Australia. And that's right, that's a lot of triple-digit heat. So I think this, we see the fireworks here first. They're going to be going into a very hot day when they start the new year. Okay, with that, we're going to wrap up this forecast video. We at Nutrien Ag Solutions thank you for your attention. Hope you look forward to our next update coming out on Thursday morning. Thank you.